My brother Isaac called me from the cockpit of a private jet headed to Monaco. "Lilith, I need you to stay calm," he said. "Your husband is on my flight right now. With his secretary. First class, champagne, the whole 9 yards." I laughed because Dean was literally in our home office on a Zoom call, and I could hear his voice through the walls. Then Isaac sent me the photo, and my entire world split in two. I was making a turkey sandwich when my brother called. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're a subscriber, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you." Not unusual, Isaac and I talked a few times a week. What was unusual was that he was calling from work. My brother's a private jet pilot for the ultra-wealthy, and he never, ever uses his phone during flights. Company policy, FAA regulations, the whole deal. So when his name popped up on my screen at 1:47 on a Thursday afternoon, I knew something was wrong. "Isaac? Are you okay?" I answered, my hand still holding the mustard knife. "Lilith." His voice had that careful quality he used when he was about to tell me something I didn't want to hear. The same tone he'd used when he called about Dad's stroke 3 years ago. "I need you to stay calm." The sandwich forgotten. "What happened? Is Mom okay?" "Mom's fine. Everyone's fine. But I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly." He paused, and I could hear the distinctive hum of a jet engine in the background. "Where's Dean right now?" I glanced toward our home office, where I could hear my husband's voice carrying through the closed door. He was on a Zoom call with someone, his tone animated and professional. "He's working from home today. In his office." "Why?" The silence on Isaac's end lasted too long. That's not possible, Lil." "What do you mean it's not possible?" I can literally hear him. I walked closer to the office door, Dean's voice becoming clearer. He was talking about quarterly projections, using that specific inflection he got when he was trying to impress someone important. "Lilith, I'm looking at him right now." Isaac's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "He's on my flight. Private charter to Monaco. He's sitting in seat 2A with a blonde woman who keeps touching his arm and laughing at everything he says. His secretary, I think. She called him Mr. Roderick when they boarded." I actually laughed. The sound came out sharp and disbelieving. "Isaac, that's insane. Dean is literally 15 feet away from me. I can hear him talking about Q3 earnings. I'm sending you a photo right now. Check your phone." My screen lit up with a message in our encrypted sibling chat, the one Isaac insisted we use after he'd flown too many paranoid tech billionaires. The photo loaded slowly, pixel by pixel, and with each line that appeared, my kitchen seemed to tilt slightly off its axis. There was Dean. My Dean. Navy Tom Ford suit, the one I'd picked up from the dry cleaner on Monday. His Patek Philippe watch catching the cabin light. His dark hair styled exactly the way he'd worn it this morning. That little cowlick on the left side that never quite behaved. He was holding a champagne flute, his head tilted toward a stunning blonde woman in her late 20s. She wore a cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my car payment, and her hand rested casually on his forearm. The timestamp on the photo read 1:43 p.m. 4 minutes ago. I stared at the image, then at the closed office door, then back at the image. The Dean in the photo had a small scar on his right hand, the one he'd gotten when he caught a champagne flute that I'd knocked over at our engagement party. The Dean in our office had that same scar. I'd kissed it just this morning. "Lilith? You still there?" Isaac's voice pulled me back. "I don't understand," I whispered. "Neither do I. But I'm looking at your husband right now, and he's definitely not in your apartment." The office door opened, and Dean emerged, coffee mug in hand. The same navy suit. The same watch. The same face I'd woken up next to for 9 years. He smiled when he saw me, that familiar half-smile that had first attracted me to him at a charity gala back in 2015. "Hey, babe. Did we run out of coffee?" I can't find the good stuff. His voice was warm, normal, completely Dean. I held the phone against my chest, muting Isaac's voice. I think we're out. I'll add it to the grocery list. Dean nodded, moving past me to check the cabinet himself. I watched him move through our kitchen with the comfortable familiarity of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. He knew which cabinet stuck slightly. He knew to duck his head under the hanging light fixture we'd been meaning to raise. He knew everything because he was Dean. Except Dean was also apparently drinking champagne at 40,000 feet with a woman who wasn't his wife. Found it, Dean said triumphantly, holding up the bag of expensive Ethiopian blend we only used for special occasions. Hidden in the back. You trying to ration the good stuff? Just forgot it was there, I managed, my voice sounding almost normal to my own ears. He poured himself a cup, then kissed my forehead. His lips were warm and familiar and completely wrong. I'll be done with calls by 4. Want to try that new Italian place tonight? Sure, I said. That sounds perfect. He disappeared back into the office, and I lifted the phone back to my ear. Isaac was saying my name, urgency creeping into his tone. I see him, I said quietly. He's right here. He just made coffee. Lilith, I'm sending another photo. Look at it. The second image showed Dean and the blonde woman at the Jets bar area. They were standing closer now, her hand on his chest, both of them laughing. The intimacy in their body language spoke of familiarity, of inside jokes and shared secrets. This wasn't a boss and secretary relationship. This was something else entirely. From the office, I heard Dean laugh at something on his Zoom call. The same laugh. The exact same rhythm and tone as the man in Isaac's photo. Isaac, I said slowly, my forensic accountant brain beginning to click into gear, don't let that plane land without documenting everything. Photos, video, passenger manifest, flight plan. Everything. What are you thinking? I looked at the closed office door, at the man inside who might or might not be my husband. I'm thinking that one of these Deans is real, and one is a very, very good fake. And I need to figure out which is which before whoever planned this finishes whatever they're planning. I spent the rest of the afternoon pretending to work on my laptop while actually watching my husband through the crack in his office door. Dean took 3 more Zoom calls, answered dozens of emails, and ordered lunch from the Thai place on the corner. Chicken pad CEW, extra spicy, no peanuts. His usual order. The delivery guy even knew him by name. Thanks, Marcus, Dean said, handing him a 20 and telling him to keep the change. The same thing he did every time. Everything was Dean. Except Dean was also somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean right now, drinking champagne with a woman young enough to be, well, definitely too young for him. My phone buzzed with another photo from Isaac. Dean and Vanessa clinking glasses, both of them laughing at something. The timestamp read 3:17 p.m. I glanced at the office. Dean was on a call, animated, gesturing with his hands the way he always did when he was excited about something. I needed to test this. Carefully. At 4:15, Dean emerged from the office, stretching his arms over his head. Finally done. God, that last client was exhausting. You know how Patterson gets. The one from Boston? I asked, my heart pounding. We didn't have a client named Patterson. I'd made up the name on the spot. Exactly, Dean said without missing a beat. He's been like that since we landed the account last year. Remember when we celebrated at that little French place in the village? We'd never celebrated at a French place in the village. We'd never had a client named Patterson at all. How could I forget? I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my system. You ordered the escargot. And you made fun of me for 20 minutes, Dean laughed, pulling me into a hug. He smelled like his cologne, Bleu de Chanel, the same one he'd worn since our 3rd date. His arms felt exactly like they always had. Strong, familiar, safe. Except nothing was safe anymore. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. So, Italian tonight, he asked, pulling back to look at me. Or should we just order in and watch something? I'm pretty beat. Let's stay in, I said. I'll make that pasta you like. His face lit up in a way that made my chest ache. The real Dean, or whoever the real Dean was, had been increasingly distant over the past few months. More distracted, more irritable, less interested in our little domestic routines. This Dean seemed genuinely excited about a quiet night at home. Perfect, he said. I'll open that wine we've been saving. We moved through our kitchen and practiced synchronization. He knew I needed the large pot from the bottom cabinet. I knew he'd automatically grab 2 wine glasses, not the fancy ones but the everyday ones we actually liked. He chopped garlic while I boiled water. We'd done this dance 100 times. But little things kept catching my attention. He was more present than usual, asking about my day and actually listening to the answer. He laughed at my story about the difficult client I'd dealt with, remembered details about my work that the recent Dean had seemed to forget. He even asked about my friend Barbara's new baby, something Dean usually couldn't keep straight because he'd never been great with my friends. This version of my husband was better. More attentive. More like the man I'd married 9 years ago. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I checked it while Dean was focused on the garlic. Isaac, touching down in Monaco. They just ordered a car to Hotel de Paris. Want me to follow? Me, yes. Everything. Photos, video, wherever they go. Isaac, already on it. Lil. I'm sorry. I looked up at Dean, who was now pouring wine into our glasses, humming something under his breath. Some song I didn't recognize. Here's to quiet nights at home, he said, handing me a glass. We should do this more often. We should, I agreed, touching my glass to his. Through the kitchen window, the sun was setting over the Manhattan skyline, painting everything in shades of gold and amber. It was the kind of moment that should have felt perfect: intimate dinner with my husband, wine, soft lighting, the comfortable silence of long-term love. Instead, all I could think about was another version of this man stepping out of a car in Monaco right now, probably holding the door for a blonde woman in a cream-colored dress, both of them about to check into one of the most expensive hotels in the world. You okay? Dean asked, studying my face. You seem distracted. Just tired, I lied. Long day. He reached across the table and squeezed my hand. His wedding ring caught the light, the simple platinum band we'd chosen together, inscribed with our wedding date. October 14, 2015. I love you, he said, and he sounded like he meant it. I love you too, I replied automatically, the words hollow in my mouth. My phone buzzed again. Another photo from Isaac. Dean and Vanessa walking into the Hotel de Paris, his hand on the small of her back, her head tilted toward his shoulder. The same man who was sitting across from me right now, holding my hand, wearing the same wedding ring. One of them was real. And I was having dinner with a lie. Dean fell asleep at 10:30, which was unusual. The real Dean, or whichever Dean was real, had become an insomniac over the past year, usually staying up until 1 or 2 in the morning scrolling through his phone or watching documentaries. This Dean kissed me goodnight, told me he loved me, and was snoring softly within 15 minutes. I lay next to him in the dark, listening to his breathing, studying the silhouette of his face in the dim light from the street below. Every detail looked right. The slight bump on his nose from a college rugby injury. The way his hair fell across his forehead. Even the small scar on his chin from a childhood bicycle accident. But details could be copied. Faces could be replicated. And someone with enough money and motivation could apparently create a perfect duplicate of my husband. At 11:30, I slipped out of bed. Dean didn't stir. I moved quietly to his home office, closing the door behind me before turning on the desk lamp. His laptop sat closed on the desk, still warm from the afternoon's work. I knew his password, we'd always been open about these things, or so I'd thought. The laptop opened to his email. Everything looked normal. Client correspondence, internal memos, the usual corporate bureaucracy of a senior investment consultant. I scrolled back through the past week. Nothing unusual. Back further. Still nothing. Then I opened his browser history. Someone had cleared it. Completely. Not a single site visited, not one search query. Dean never cleared his browser history. He barely knew how. I moved to the file cabinet where he kept our financial records. My hands were steady. 9 years as a forensic accountant had taught me to compartmentalize panic. I pulled out our joint credit card statements from the past 6 months and spread them across the desk. There. Hotel de Paris, Monaco. March 15th to 18th. A charge for €4,200. I pulled out my phone and checked my calendar for those dates. Dean had been at a regional conference in Chicago. I'd been in Boston for an audit. We'd texted goodnight each evening, normal conversations about our days. Except he hadn't been in Chicago. I kept digging. Cartier, Geneva. €8,500. June 3rd. I'd never received jewelry from Cartier. Another hotel charge, this time Paris. Ritz Paris. €3,800. July 22nd to 24th. He'd told me he was visiting a college friend in Philadelphia that weekend. My phone buzzed. Isaac, calling via video. Sorry, I know it's late there, he whispered, his face illuminated by his phone screen. But you need to see this. The camera flipped around. He was standing across the street from the Hotel de Paris, zoomed in on the entrance. They just checked in 20 minutes ago. I followed them through the lobby. They're in the honeymoon suite. Room 502. He signed the register as Mr. and Mrs. Roderick. The room tilted slightly. Mrs. Roderick. Vanessa was using my name. Isaac, what did she look like up close? Mid-20s, blonde, expensive everything. The staff knew them. The concierge called Dean by name, asked if they wanted their usual champagne sent up. Their usual. They'd been here before. Multiple times. I need you to send me every photo, every video, every timestamp, I said quietly. I'm building a timeline. Already done. Check your encrypted folder. I opened the folder on my phone. Isaac had been thorough. Dozens of photos and videos from the flight, the airport, the hotel. I cross-referenced them against Dean's calendar and our credit card statements. Every business trip matched up with a luxury hotel charge. Every conference corresponded to flights I could now trace. The pattern went back almost a year. Behind me, I heard movement in the bedroom. I quickly closed the laptop and slipped the credit card statements back into the file cabinet. When I climbed back into bed, Dean stirred. Everything okay? He mumbled, half asleep. Just needed some water, I lied. He reached for my hand in the dark, interlacing his fingers with mine. The gesture was automatic, instinctive. Something we'd done every night for 9 years. Love you, he murmured, already falling back asleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, my hand in his, my mind calculating the scope of the deception. Tomorrow, I'd run the final tests. But I already knew the answer. This man in my bed wasn't my husband. My husband was in Monaco, checking into a honeymoon suite with his secretary, using our name, spending our money, living an entirely separate life. The question now wasn't whether I was living with an imposter. The question was, who was he, and how long had the real Dean been gone? Morning came too quickly. I'd managed maybe 2 hours of actual sleep, my mind racing through possibilities, each one more disturbing than the last. Dean, or whoever this was, woke up at 6:30 exactly, same as always, and headed to the shower. I went to the kitchen and started making breakfast. Not his usual Greek yogurt with granola. Instead, I made runny scrambled eggs with ketchup, the way my father used to make them. Dean hated runny eggs. Hated ketchup on eggs even more. He'd told me once that it was an abomination against food. Smells great, he said, emerging from the bedroom in his robe, hair still damp. He sat at the kitchen island and looked at the plate I set in front of him with genuine appreciation. Then he picked up his fork and ate. Not a grimace. Not a moment of hesitation. He ate my father's eggs with enthusiasm, even adding more ketchup. These are delicious, he said between bites. You should make them more often. I will, I said, my voice carefully neutral. Hey, I was thinking about our anniversary next month. October 15th. We should do something special. Absolutely, he agreed. Can't believe it'll be 9 years already. Our anniversary was October 14th. And maybe we should visit Dad this weekend, I continued, pouring coffee. It's been a while. That's a great idea. Your dad would love that. How's he been feeling? My father had been dead for 3 years. I set the coffee mug down carefully. You know what, I need to make a work call. Excuse me. I walked to the bedroom and closed the door, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I pulled out my phone and typed a message to Isaac. It's not him. I just confirmed it. The man in my apartment is not Dean. The response came immediately. What do you need me to do? I looked at the closed bedroom door, thinking about the stranger eating breakfast in my kitchen, wearing my husband's face, sleeping in my husband's bed. Keep following the real Dean. I need to know everything. Where he goes, who he meets, what he does. Everything. And you? I thought about my expertise in forensic accounting, about tracing money through shell companies and offshore accounts, about finding patterns in financial chaos. I'm going to figure out who's in my apartment. And then I'm going to find out what they did with my husband. Marie Finch arrived at the coffee shop in Chelsea at exactly 9 o'clock, carrying a leather messenger bag that probably contained enough surveillance equipment to make the NSA jealous. We'd been friends since college, back when she was studying criminal justice and I was drowning in accounting theory. Now she ran a private investigation firm that specialized in cases nobody else wanted to touch. Show me everything, she said, sliding into the booth across from me. No preamble. No small talk. That was Marie. I pushed my laptop across the table, the screen displaying side-by-side photos. On the left, Dean from Isaac's photos in Monaco, laughing with Vanessa at the Hotel de Paris. On the right, a screenshot from our home security camera, Dean leaving for his gym session this morning. Marie studied them for a long moment, then pulled out her own tablet. I need you to send me all the video footage you have. Home security, anything from your building, and whatever your brother captured. You think it's really not him? I think, Marie said carefully, that you're dealing with something much more sophisticated than a simple affair. If your instincts are right, this is professional-level identity replacement. That requires resources, planning, and technical capability. She spent the next 20 minutes running the footage through software I didn't understand. Facial mapping, gait analysis, microexpression recognition. Technical terms that sounded like science fiction. There, she said finally, pointing at her screen. Look at the eye movement patterns. The man in Monaco blinks 47 times per minute on average. The man in your apartment blinks 62 times. Consistent across all footage. People blink differently when they're nervous, I offered, grasping for rational explanations. Not with that level of consistency. And look here, she zoomed in on a video of Dean walking through our living room. His gait is 0.3 seconds slower in the left leg. It's barely noticeable, but it's there. The Monaco Dean doesn't have that delay. The coffee turned bitter in my mouth. So they're definitely different people. They're different people who look identical. Which means we're dealing with either an unknown twin. Dean doesn't have a twin. I've met his whole family. Or we're dealing with something else. Marie pulled up another screen. I'm running the footage through AI detection software. Looking for signs of deep fake technology or augmented reality overlays. You think someone's using AI to make an imposter look like Dean? I think someone has invested serious money into making this deception flawless. The question is why? She looked at me directly. Lilith, I need to access your building security system. Full archives. Can you get me authorization? I know the building manager. He owes me a favor. 2 hours later, we were in the building security office, scrolling through 3 months of footage. The building manager, a nervous man named Harold, hovered nearby. There, Marie said, freezing the footage. June 18, 9:47 a.m. The video showed Dean leaving our building with 2 large suitcases and a garment bag. His posture was tense, his movements hurried. Not his usual confident stride. Where was he going? Marie asked me. He said he had a conference in San Francisco. 5 days. I was in Miami for work. We watched Dean get into a car. Then Marie fast-forwarded. The next day, June 19, 10:23 a.m., Dean appeared again, entering the building. Same clothes, same build, but something about his body language was different. More relaxed. More confident. Can you zoom in on his face? I asked. Harold manipulated the controls. The image pixelated but enlarged. The Dean entering the building looked exactly like the Dean who had left. But there was something in his eyes. A calculation. A performance. Now watch this, Marie said, pulling up another file. Building maintenance logs. June 18 to June 19, the security system was offline for upgrades for exactly 14 hours. Convenient timing. Someone manipulated the footage, I breathed. Or replaced it entirely. Professional job. Harold, do you remember anything unusual from that period? Harold shifted uncomfortably. Actually, yeah. I remember Mr. Roderick came back, and something felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it. Maybe he seemed happier. I figured the conference went well. Marie and I exchanged looks. Harold, thank you. We may need to come back to this. Back in Marie's car, she pulled out her phone. I ran a background check on Vanessa while you were talking to Harold. Lilith, she's not a secretary. Her real name is Vanessa Halliday. Former corporate intelligence specialist. She's worked for 3 firms that were later investigated for industrial espionage. What does she do? She helps wealthy people disappear. New identities, offshore accounts, untraceable money transfers. And according to her financial records, Marie showed me her screen, she's been receiving regular payments from an account in Dean's name for 2 years. 2 years. Before the switch. Before Monaco. Before everything. Marie, are you saying Dean planned this? That he wanted to be replaced? I'm saying your husband has been planning to disappear for at least 2 years, and he found someone who could make it look like he never left. She started the car. The question is, why would someone go to this much trouble? What's he running from? Or what's he running toward? My phone buzzed. Isaac, sending another photo from Monaco. Dean and Vanessa at a cafe, reviewing documents spread across the table. Legal documents, from the look of them. I zoomed in on one page. Just barely visible at the top, irrevocable trust agreement. Marie, I said slowly, I think my husband is trying to steal everything I own. The realization hit me while I was staring at Isaac's photo of those legal documents in Monaco. Dean had always been deathly allergic to peanuts. Not just avoid them, allergic, full anaphylaxis, carry 2 EpiPens at all times allergic. He'd been hospitalized 3 times in the decade I'd known him. Once on our second date when the restaurant assured us the sauce was peanut-free. It wasn't. That medical alert bracelet on his wrist wasn't just jewelry. It was survival equipment. I looked up at the closed bathroom door, where the man pretending to be my husband was currently singing off-key in the shower. Then I pulled out my phone and ordered Thai delivery. Specifically, I ordered Mossaman curry, Dean's supposed favorite from before the allergy developed. The one loaded with peanut sauce that he always watched me eat with nostalgic longing. I'm surprised you ordered Thai, James, because that's who he was, not Dean, said when he emerged from the bathroom 45 minutes later, hair damp, wearing Dean's robe. Thought you'd be sick of it after yesterday. We hadn't ordered Thai yesterday. Another failure in a list of thousands. I was craving it, I said, setting out the containers. And look, they had Mossaman curry. I know you always say you miss it. I watched his face carefully. Any hesitation would give him away. Any moment of calculation would reveal the performance. He smiled broadly. God, I haven't had this in years. Not since before. He trailed off, sitting down at the table. Before the allergy, I finished for him. Right. The allergy. He picked up his fork, twirling the noodles. Then he took a bite. A big one. I held my breath, counting seconds. 5. 10. 15. 30. Nothing happened. No swelling. No difficulty breathing. No reaching for the EpiPen that sat in every room of our apartment, including the kitchen counter 3 feet away from him. He took another bite. This is amazing. I forgot how good this was. I excused myself to the bathroom and threw up. When I came back, composed and steady, James was finishing his curry, completely healthy, completely oblivious to the fact that he'd just failed the most important test of his life. You okay? He asked, concern manufactured but convincing. You look pale. Just a headache. I'm going to lie down. Want me to get you anything? No. I just need rest. I waited until he was absorbed in his laptop, supposedly working on client reports, before I moved to the hall closet where he kept his briefcase. The expensive leather one Dean had bought 3 years ago, worn soft from daily use. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside, the usual, laptop, file folders, business cards. But underneath, in a zippered compartment I'd never noticed before, was a wallet I didn't recognize. The driver's license read James Lysander. Age 34. Address in Queens. The face was Dean's face, but the name was wrong, all wrong. Behind the license, headshots. Professional 8x10s of James in various poses. A SAG-AFTRA union card. A resume listing theatrical performances, commercial work, and one line that made my blood run cold: character immersion specialist, long-term assignments. There were notes. Pages and pages of notes in handwriting that wasn't Dean's. Subject prefers coffee black, 1 sugar. Never creamer. Anniversary October 14th, claims to forget but always remembers. Mother's maiden name, Chen. Died when subject was 12. Sensitive topic. Weekly calls to sister, Tuesday and Thursday evenings. My entire marriage reduced to study notes for an acting role. At the bottom of the briefcase, wrapped in a Ziploc bag like evidence, was a phone. Not Dean's iPhone, a burner with a cracked screen. I turned it on. The messages loaded slowly. A conversation between James and someone listed only as Dr. Status report. James, she suspects nothing. Performance holding steady. No breaks in character. Good. Meeting with estate attorney scheduled for Monday 10 a.m. You'll accompany her. Make sure she signs everything. James, the trust documents? Everything. Power of attorney, trust transfer, account access. Once signatures are secured, you're done. Final payment on completion. James, and then? Then you disappear. I disappear. And she gets to figure out what happened to her money. There was a photo attached to the next message. Legal documents spread across a table. I recognized the letterhead, our estate attorney's office. Documents that would transfer everything into a revocable trust that Dean would control. Except Dean wouldn't control it. Dean would disappear, and so would everything we'd built together. I took photos of everything with my encrypted phone, the ID, the notes, the messages, the contract showing James would receive a $50,000 bonus upon successful asset transfer completion. Then I carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. Back in the living room, James was still working on his laptop, the picture of dedicated husband and professional. "Feeling better?" he asked without looking up. "Much better," I said, and I meant it. Because now I knew exactly what they were planning. And I had 72 hours to destroy them both. I stepped into the bedroom and called Marie. "I need you to listen very carefully," I said quietly. "And then I need you to help me commit a felony." There was a pause. "Then, I'm listening." "Dean's been liquidating our assets for 6 months. I need to know where every dollar went. Every account, every shell company, every offshore transfer. Can you trace it? Give me 48 hours. You have 24. Because in 72 hours, they're planning to get me to sign documents that will make everything disappear." "And Marie?" I looked at the closed bedroom door, at the man beyond it living a lie so complete he probably dreamed in character. "I need to know how to make it hurt. Financial hurt or legal hurt? Both. I want Dean to regret the day he decided I was too stupid to notice he'd been replaced by an actor from Queens." Marie's laugh was sharp and dangerous. "Now you're speaking my language. I'll call you in 2 hours with preliminary findings. In the meantime, act normal. Don't let James know you know." "Marie?" I said before she could hang up. "How did you know his name was James?" "Because I'm very good at my job, Lilith. And because I've been running my own investigation since this morning. Your husband isn't the only one who can hire professionals." She hung up, leaving me standing in my bedroom, staring at my reflection in the mirror. I looked the same as I had a week ago. Same auburn hair, same tired eyes, same woman who'd built a career on finding money people tried to hide. But I wasn't the same. Not anymore. Because now I was hunting. And Dean had forgotten a very important fact about forensic accountants: we don't just find hidden money. We destroy the people who hide it. Marie's call came at 2 in the morning. I was lying awake next to James, who slept the peaceful sleep of someone who didn't know his performance was over. I slipped out of bed and into the bathroom, turning on the shower to mask my voice. "I found it all," Marie said without preamble. "Lilith, it's worse than we thought." I sat on the edge of the bathtub, my encrypted phone pressed against my ear. "Tell me." $2.3 million extracted from your joint accounts over 6 months. But it's the method that's impressive. He pulled it in amounts just below federal reporting thresholds. Classic structuring. He'd go to prison just for that. Where did it go? Everywhere and nowhere. 3 shell companies in the Cayman Islands. 2 more in Luxembourg. The money bounced between accounts before landing in a Swiss private bank. But here's where it gets interesting. I heard papers rustling. He didn't just steal your money. He bought assets with it. A 2-bedroom apartment in Monaco, purchased 4 months ago. A chalet in Verbier. And a yacht currently docked in Malta under the name New Beginning. I almost laughed at the yacht's name. Almost. "There's more," Marie continued. "I found joint bank accounts with Vanessa Halliday. Not just one, 7 different accounts across 4 countries. Some have been active for 18 months. 18 months. Long before the switch. Long before James. Marie, this wasn't spontaneous. Extensively planned. But Lilith, I found something worse." Her voice dropped. "I accessed your work computer's login history. Someone has been accessing your client files remotely for the past 4 months. Confidential financial data, merger information, proprietary analysis." My stomach dropped. My clients? Cross-referencing the access dates with stock movements, there's a pattern. Insider trading. Someone used information from your files to make trades through those offshore accounts. We're talking about SEC violation territory. And guess whose credentials were used for the access? Mine. Yours. If this gets discovered, you're not just losing your marriage and your money. You're losing your career and possibly your freedom. He's setting you up to take the fall. I thought about the past 4 months. James in the apartment, always nearby when I worked from home. Always interested in my cases, asking innocent questions about my clients. How's that pharmaceutical merger going? Did that tech acquisition close? Questions that seemed like normal spousal interest but were actually intelligence gathering. He's been watching me work, I said quietly. Every client meeting I discussed at dinner became actionable intelligence. Lilith, this is sophisticated financial crime. Dean didn't just want out of your marriage. He wanted to gut you completely and make sure you couldn't come after him. My phone buzzed with an incoming video call from Isaac. I switched over. His face appeared, illuminated by Monaco's streetlights. It was 8 a.m. there. I've been following them since yesterday, he said, looking exhausted. They just left a law office. Maitre Laurent and Associates. High-end international firm. I got friendly with a paralegal on her smoke break. And? They're establishing permanent residency in Monaco. Submitted all the paperwork yesterday. Monaco doesn't extradite for financial crimes, Lil. Once he's a resident, he's untouchable. The room seemed to tilt. What else? I followed them to a cafe after. Sat close enough to overhear some of their conversation. Dean was on the phone with someone, might have been the attorney. He said, once the wife signs on Monday, everything transfers automatically. We'll be clear. Monday. The estate attorney meeting James had mentioned casually 2 days ago. Isaac, is there anything else? Anything at all? He hesitated. Yeah. Vanessa's pregnant. I saw her take prenatal vitamins at breakfast. And they were looking at private schools online. They're not planning a temporary escape, Lil. They're building a whole new life. After Isaac hung up, I switched back to Marie. How long have you been listening? The whole time. Lilith, we need to contact the FBI. This is federal wire fraud, money laundering, securities fraud. No. No. Not yet. If we bring in authorities now, Dean will hear about it through his attorney. He'll disappear before they can touch him. And I'll still be holding the bag on the insider trading charges. I stood, pacing the small bathroom. We need to be smarter than that. What are you thinking? I looked at my reflection in the mirror. At some point during this conversation, something in my face had changed. The confusion and hurt had burned away, leaving something harder behind. I'm thinking that Dean planned this for years. He hired an actor, established offshore accounts, set up shell companies, created an escape route to a country with no extradition. He thought of everything. Okay. But he forgot one thing. He forgot that I'm a forensic accountant. I find hidden money for a living. I trace fraud schemes through impossible mazes of shell companies. And Marie? I smiled, though there was nothing pleasant about it. I've never failed to recover stolen assets. Not once in 9 years. So what's the play? Monday morning, I'm going to that attorney meeting. I'm going to smile and nod and listen to whatever documents they want me to sign. And then, I thought about Dean in Monaco, probably sleeping peacefully next to his pregnant mistress, confident in his brilliant plan. Then I'm going to show him what happens when you underestimate your wife. I'm going to need more details than that. Tomorrow. Come to the apartment at noon. James will be at his client lunch, I made air quotes, and we'll build the trap. But Marie? I need one more thing from you. Name it. I need to know everything about James Lysander. Everything. Where he lives, who hired him, how he was recruited, what they promised him. Because he's going to help us, whether he wants to or not. You're going to flip him? I'm going to give him a choice: help me destroy Dean, or go to prison as an accessory to multiple federal crimes. I'm betting a struggling actor from Queens will choose survival over loyalty. Marie was quiet for a moment. Then, you know what? I think I'm actually starting to feel sorry for Dean. He has no idea what's about to hit him. Good, I said. He should have thought of that before he hired a replacement husband and tried to steal my life. Marie arrived at noon carrying 2 coffees and a manila folder thick enough to be a manuscript. Through the window, I'd watched James leave 20 minutes earlier for his supposed client lunch meeting. Tell me you have something I can use, I said, locking the door behind her. She dropped the folder on the dining table with a heavy thud. James Anthony Lysander. Age 34. Born in Astoria, Queens. BFA in theater from SUNY Purchase. Moved to Manhattan at 22 with dreams of Broadway. I opened the folder. The first page was a headshot: James, younger, more hopeful, before he became a professional impersonator of my husband. Career highlights, Marie continued. 3 years of off-Broadway shows that closed within weeks. Commercial work for hemorrhoid cream and a local car dealership. Oh, and he played concerned pedestrian number 2 in one episode of Law and Order SVU. What about his finances? Drowning. $47,000 in student loans. Credit cards maxed out. Was 3 months behind on rent for a studio apartment in Sunnyside when Dean approached him. She pulled out bank statements. Then suddenly, 6 months ago, $25,000 deposited. Another $25,000 3 months ago when he moved into your apartment. I studied James' financial records. The desperation was visible in the numbers. The overdraft fees, the minimum payments, the slow-motion collapse of someone trying to make it in an impossible industry. He's not a criminal mastermind, I said quietly. He's just desperate. Gets better. I found the original contract. Marie pulled out a photocopy. Dean hired him through a talent agency that doesn't exist. The contract describes the job as immersive performance art for private documentary filming. James was told he'd be playing a wealthy husband for a documentary about marriage and identity. He thought he was going to be famous. I read through the contract. It was carefully worded to sound legitimate while being completely fraudulent. Dean played him, I said. Completely. And here's the kicker, Marie pulled out another document. Dean gave James recording equipment. Told him to document his process for behind-the-scenes footage. James has been recording everything. His coaching sessions with Dean, his daily notes, his struggles with maintaining character. He documented his own crime. He documented Dean's crime. Every instruction Dean gave him, every detail about the fraud, every conversation about the endgame, James recorded it all thinking he was creating documentary material. Marie smiled. The man built our entire case for us. Where are the recordings? His apartment. I have the address. We can get them tonight when James is here playing house with you. No. I'll get them. But first, I opened my laptop. Show me this digital trap you're building. For the next 2 hours, Marie walked me through the malware she'd embedded in fake estate documents. To anyone looking, they'd appear as legitimate trust transfer papers from our attorney's office. But the moment Dean opened them on any device, the software would deploy. It's beautiful, Marie said, pulling up the code. The second he opens these files, the malware maps every device he's connected to, every account he's accessed, every password he's saved. Then it creates a mirror of everything, accounts, transactions, communications, and sends it to a secure server only we can access. And then, when you give the signal Monday morning, it activates phase 2. Every offshore account freezes. Every shell company locks. Every asset becomes inaccessible. Simultaneously, automated reports go to the FBI Financial Crimes Division, the SEC, and Interpol. He'll be trapped. He'll be paralyzed. Can't access money, can't flee, can't do anything except wait for federal agents to knock on his door in Monaco. Marie closed her laptop. Lilith, this is irreversible. Once you trigger this, there's no going back. Good, I said. I want him to know exactly who destroyed him. That evening, I sat across from James at our dining table, watching him perform the role of attentive husband. He'd made pasta, not quite right, too much garlic, but he was trying. He asked about my day, laughed at appropriate moments, maintained the character with the dedication of someone who'd been promised this would change his life. This is really good, I said, taking another bite. Thanks. I used that recipe you showed me last month. I'd never shown him any recipe. Because I'd never shown Dean any recipe either. James, I said quietly. He froze, fork halfway to his mouth. Something in my tone broke through the performance. Tell me about your apartment in Queens. The fork clattered against his plate. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then slowly, his shoulders dropped. The British accent melted away, replaced by pure Brooklyn. How long have you known? Does it matter? He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time in 3 months. Without the performance, his face was different. Younger. More scared. I'm so sorry. God, I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know what this really was. But you know now. I started figuring it out a few weeks ago. The questions you were asking, the way you'd test me on things. I realized you knew something was wrong. He pushed his plate away. I wanted to tell you. I almost told you a dozen times. But I was terrified. The money, the contract, the things Dean said would happen if I broke character. What did he say would happen? That I'd be arrested for fraud. That I'd never work again. That he had lawyers who would destroy me. James ran his hands through his hair. I'm just an actor, Lilith. I'm nobody. And he's this powerful investment guy with money and connections and... James, stop. I kept my voice calm. I need you to listen very carefully. Monday morning, you and I have a meeting with our estate attorney. Dean expects you to make sure I sign documents transferring everything to him. Are you following? He nodded, pale. Here's what's actually going to happen. You're going to go to that meeting. You're going to act like everything is normal. And when I signal you, you're going to tell the truth about everything. Who you really are, who hired you, why you're there. He'll destroy me. No. I'm going to destroy him. You're going to help me do it. And in exchange, you walk away with immunity and the money he's already paid you. I leaned forward. Or you can refuse, and I'll make sure the FBI knows you were a willing participant in financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. Your choice. James stared at me, weighing his options. Finally, what do you need me to do? Everything Dean told you to do, but this time, you're working for me. James didn't sleep that night. Neither did I. We sat in the living room, the space we'd shared as fake spouses for 3 months, and he told me everything. The casting notice said they needed someone who could do British accents, he began, his voice hollow. Immersive documentary about marriage and identity. Good pay, unique opportunity, potential for future projects. I auditioned with 200 other guys. What made them pick you? Dean said I had the right look. The right build. That I could be transformed with the right coaching. James laughed bitterly. I thought I'd finally caught my break. A real-paid acting job. Maybe some industry exposure. When did the coaching start? 6 months before I moved in here. 3 sessions a week. Dean would drill me on everything. Your favorite foods, your mother's name, how you take your coffee. He had me watch videos of you two together, stuff from your wedding, vacation footage. I had to memorize the way you interacted. The nausea returned. He recorded us? For years, apparently. He said he was creating a documentary about marriage. I studied you like a script, Lilith. Your speech patterns, the stories from your childhood, inside jokes I didn't understand but had to memorize anyway. James met my eyes. He told me you knew. That the marriage was over and this was performance art you'd both agreed to. That you'd signed releases. You believe that? I wanted to believe it. The money was real. The contract looked legitimate. And Dean was so convincing, so detailed. He said you were both getting something out of it. What exactly did he say I was getting? James pulled out his phone, scrolling through notes. He said, and I quote, Lilith is a brilliant woman who wants out of this marriage but needs plausible deniability for her corporate clients. She can't be seen as the one who left. So we're creating an elaborate exit strategy that protects both our reputations. My eyes burned. Dean had thought of everything. Even James's potential guilt had been neutralized with a carefully constructed lie. When did you start to suspect the truth? About a month in. Little things. You'd test me on memories, and I'd catch the way your face changed when I got them wrong. The way you'd look at me sometimes, not like someone playing along, but like someone trying to solve a puzzle. He paused. And then your brother called that day. I heard your side of the conversation. The confusion in your voice was real. That's when I knew Dean had lied to me. Why didn't you leave? Fear. The contract had clauses about penalties for breaking confidentiality. Dean said he had lawyers who'd sue me into oblivion. And honestly, I needed the money. My rent was due, my student loans were in default, I was drowning. So I kept performing, telling myself maybe I was wrong. Marie arrived at midnight with her laptop and external hard drives. James led us to his apartment in Sunnyside, a fifth-floor walk-up that smelled like old cooking oil and broken dreams. The studio was exactly what I expected, a mattress on the floor, folding table covered in notes, and most importantly, a shelf full of recording equipment. Dean gave me all this, James said, gesturing to the microphones and digital recorders. Said I should document my process for the documentary. Marie started downloading files while I read through James's handwritten notes. Pages and pages of Dean's coaching sessions, each one more damning than the last. June 15th session, Dean explains the peanut allergy story. Says to avoid anything with peanuts just to be safe, but that Lilith never actually tests this because she's too considerate. Except I had tested it. And James had failed. Marie pulled up an audio file. Listen to this. Dean's voice filled the small apartment, clear and unmistakable. The key is confidence. Lilith is brilliant with numbers but terrible at reading people. She'll doubt herself before she doubts you. If you maintain character, she'll convince herself everything is normal. Another recording, dated 2 months ago, after she signs the trust documents, you vanish. Delete everything, dump the phones, go back to being James. I'll make sure the trail leads nowhere. He was going to frame me too, James whispered. Once the money was transferred, I'd be the perfect patsy. The actor who impersonated her husband and stole everything while the real Dean was unreachable in Monaco. He underestimated both of us, I said. Marie looked up from her laptop. I've got everything. Hundreds of hours of audio, video files, written instructions. Dean documented his own conspiracy. My phone buzzed. Isaac, calling from Monaco. I put him on speaker. They just left a bank meeting, he said without preamble. I followed them to a cafe afterward. Lilith, Dean was on the phone with someone, maybe his lawyer. He said, after Monday, once all remaining assets are transferred, we're gone. Tickets to Singapore are booked for Tuesday morning. Singapore? Marie looked up sharply. Limited extradition treaty with the U.S. for financial crimes, I said. He researched the best places to disappear. There's more, Isaac continued. Vanessa's definitely pregnant, about 5 months along. They were looking at apartments in Singapore online. This isn't temporary. They're building a permanent life. 5 months pregnant. The affair had been going on longer than even I thought. While I was sleeping next to James, Dean was with Vanessa in Monaco, planning their future family. "One more thing," Isaac said, his voice tight with anger. Dean told Vanessa, "My wife won't know until it's too late. She'll spend months unwinding the damage, and by then we'll be untouchable." I looked at James, who'd gone pale. At Marie, whose expression had turned predatory. At the apartment full of evidence of Dean's meticulous betrayal. "Isaac," I said calmly, "make sure you're on a flight back to New York by Monday afternoon. I want you there when this ends." "What are you going to do?" "Exactly what Dean taught me to do. I'm going to be brilliant with numbers." I smiled, though there was no warmth in it. "And I'm going to show him what happens when you underestimate your wife." After Isaac hung up, James asked quietly, "What happens to me? After tomorrow?" "You testify. You cooperate with federal investigators. You hand over every recording, every note, every piece of evidence. And then you walk away. That's it? That's it. You were a victim too, James. Dean manipulated you, lied to you, and planned to destroy you. I'm not interested in punishing you." I stood, preparing to leave his sad little apartment. "But Dean? Dean is going to learn that stealing from a forensic accountant is the stupidest thing you can do." "Why are you protecting me?" James asked, his voice breaking slightly. "I helped destroy your life." I paused at the door, looking back at this failed actor who'd been promised Hollywood dreams and got federal crimes instead. "Because you were a pawn, James. Dean was the player. And I only destroy the people who deserve it." Marie and I left with hard drives full of evidence. The FBI had been quietly building a case since Marie contacted them Friday. By Monday morning, they'd have everything: financial records, recordings, testimonies, a complete map of Dean's conspiracy. Back in my apartment, the last night I'd spend there, I lay in bed staring at the ceiling while James slept fitfully on the couch. Tomorrow, everything would end. The performance, the lies, the elaborate deception Dean thought made him untouchable. My phone lit up with a final message from Marie, "FBI confirmed ready. All evidence submitted. International warrants being prepared. Once you give the signal tomorrow, it's over." I typed back, "Good. Let's show Dean what happens when you underestimate your wife." In Monaco, Dean was probably sleeping peacefully next to Vanessa, confident in his brilliant plan. In Singapore, a new apartment waited. A new life. A clean escape. He had no idea that in 18 hours, his world would collapse. And he'd know, with absolute certainty, that his wife had destroyed him. I smiled in the darkness. Tomorrow couldn't come fast enough. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made Manhattan look almost beautiful. James and I dressed in silence, him in Dean's navy suit, me in the burgundy dress I'd worn to our last anniversary dinner. Both of us preparing for performances, but only one of us knew how this scene would end. Marie called at 8:30. "FBI is in position. 2 agents in the building lobby, 3 more in vehicles outside. International task force standing by. The second you give the signal, everything activates." And Dean? Still in Monaco. Probably having breakfast right now, thinking he's won. I could hear the satisfaction in her voice. He has no idea what's about to hit him. James emerged from the bedroom, adjusting Dean's favorite tie, the silk one with subtle gold threading. His hands shook slightly. "You okay?" I asked. "I'm about to confess to federal crimes in front of a lawyer who thinks I'm someone else. So, no, not really okay." He managed a weak smile. "But I'm ready. This ends today." The car service arrived at 9:15. We rode in silence through Manhattan traffic, James staring out the window like a man heading to his own execution. Maybe he was. The law offices of Pemberton and Associates occupied the entire 47th floor of a glass tower in Midtown. Richard Pemberton himself greeted us in the marble lobby, silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of lawyer who charged $1,000 to answer an email. Dean, Lilith, wonderful to see you both. He shook James's hand firmly, then mine. Shall we? Conference room 3 has everything prepared. The conference room overlooked Central Park, autumn colors visible even from this height. On the polished mahogany table sat a stack of documents easily 3 inches thick. Now then, Pemberton said, settling into his chair. What we have here is a relatively straightforward trust restructuring. The irrevocable trust will provide enhanced asset protection and significant tax advantages. I picked up the first document. My eyes, trained from years of forensic accounting, caught the important clauses immediately. Section 4.2, all assets transferred to trust shall be under sole control of primary trustee, Dean Roderick. Section 7.1, secondary trustee, Lilith Roderick, waives all rights to unilateral decisions regarding trust assets. This wasn't asset protection. This was asset theft with a legal veneer. Mr. Pemberton, I said calmly, I'd like to review the beneficiary structure in detail before signing. He smiled indulgently. Of course. As you can see in Section 9. I'd like to see it on screen. Could you pull up the digital version? That's unnecessary, Mrs. Roderick. I insist. My voice remained pleasant but firm. I'm a forensic accountant. I don't sign financial documents without reviewing digital formats. Pemberton sighed but opened his laptop, clicking through folders. Very well. Let me just open the file. The moment he clicked the document, I felt my phone vibrate 3 times in quick succession. Marie's signal. The malware was active. Somewhere in the digital ether, Marie's software was mapping every device Pemberton's computer had ever connected to. Every shared network. Every cloud storage system. And most importantly, every account Dean had accessed through Pemberton's encrypted communications. I stood slowly, setting down the unsigned documents. Mrs. Roderick? Pemberton looked up, confused. Is something wrong? Before I sign anything, I said, my voice carrying a weight that made James sit up straighter, I need to know something. I turned to face James fully. What's your real name? The color drained from James's face. Pemberton's eyes darted between us, his lawyer instinct sensing something very wrong. I don't understand, James stammered, but his accent was already slipping. The British precision giving way to Brooklyn edges. Your real name, I repeated. Not the name of the man you're pretending to be. Your actual name. Pemberton stood. Mrs. Roderick, what is the meaning of this? James looked at me, then at Pemberton, then back at me. I saw the moment he committed to the truth. His shoulders dropped. His posture changed. The entire performance fell away. My name is James Lysander, he said, pure Brooklyn now. I'm an actor from Queens. I was hired 6 months ago to impersonate Dean Roderick. That's not your client sitting here. The real Dean Roderick is in Monaco. The silence in the conference room was absolute. Pemberton's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and dawning horror. This is absurd. Dean, tell her this is some kind of joke. It's not a joke, I said, pulling out my tablet. James was paid $50,000 to replace my husband while the real Dean systematically stole our assets and fled the country. And you, Mr. Pemberton, have been facilitating this fraud, whether you knew it or not. I turned the tablet toward him. On screen, audio recordings of Dean coaching James. Bank transfers to offshore accounts. Property purchases in Monaco. The entire conspiracy laid out in irrefutable detail. I could be disbarred, Pemberton whispered, sinking into his chair. I could go to prison. You could, I agreed. Unless you cooperate fully. Right now. Give me every communication you've had with Dean Roderick. Every document, every email, every phone call record. This is protected by attorney-client privilege. Which doesn't apply when the attorney is being used to commit crimes. Mr. Pemberton, you have about 2 minutes to decide whether you're Dean's victim or his accomplice. His phone rang. He answered with shaking hands. Yes? His assistant's voice carried through the speaker. Mr. Pemberton, there are FBI agents in the lobby. They're asking for you specifically. Something about financial fraud investigation? Pemberton's face went white. He looked at me, then at James, then at the phone in his hand like it had transformed into a snake. Mrs. Roderick, he said carefully, I think we need to discuss this situation in detail. And I think, he swallowed hard, I think I need to call my own attorney. Good idea, I said. And while you're doing that, you should probably tell them to prepare for federal questioning. I pressed send on my phone, the signal to Marie. In that moment, across the world, Dean Roderick's carefully constructed empire began to collapse. Every offshore account froze. Every shell company locked. Every asset became inaccessible. In Monaco, Dean's phone would be ringing with alerts he couldn't explain. Bank accounts showing zero balances. Investment portfolios unavailable. The financial infrastructure of his entire escape plan crumbling in real time. I looked at Pemberton, who was frantically typing on his phone, probably trying to reach Dean. At James, who sat pale and quiet, his performance finally over. At the unsigned documents that would have stolen everything I'd worked for. Gentlemen, I said calmly, I think it's time we let the FBI join this meeting. I walked to the conference room door and opened it. 2 federal agents stood in the hallway, credentials already visible. Mrs. Roderick, the lead agent asked. Agent Sarah Chen, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We're here about Dean Roderick. Perfect timing, I said, stepping aside. I believe you'll want to speak with Mr. Pemberton and Mr. Lysander. They have a lot to tell you. Behind me, I heard Pemberton's voice, defeated, I want immunity. I'll tell you everything. I want immunity. And James, quietly, I have recordings. Hours of them. Dean explaining the whole plan. It's all documented. I walked to the window overlooking Central Park, my phone already ringing with Marie's call. It's done, she said. Every account is frozen. Interpol has been notified. French authorities are moving on Dean's location right now. Lilith, you did it. I watched the fall colors in the park below, thinking about Dean waking up in Monaco this morning, probably congratulating himself on his brilliant plan. He was about to have a very different kind of morning. Marie, I said, tell Isaac to turn on the news. I want him to see this. Because in Monaco, federal agents were about to arrest my husband. And I wanted my brother to watch. The FBI interrogation room was nothing like the movies. No two-way mirror, no single harsh light. Just a bland conference room with acoustic tiles and the faint hum of ventilation. Agent Sarah Chen sat across from me, her laptop open, recording device visible on the table. Mrs. Roderick, I have to say, she paused, scrolling through the evidence Marie had provided. In 15 years of financial crimes investigation, I've never seen a case this thoroughly documented by a victim. You basically did our job for us. Occupational hazard, I said. I'm a forensic accountant. I find hidden money for a living. Found your own missing millions, plus another $1.5 million we didn't even know about. She looked up from her screen. Your husband was running 3 separate fraud schemes simultaneously. You weren't his only victim. That stopped me cold. What? Pemberton is talking. Turns out Dean had 2 other clients with wives in high-level financial positions. Same playbook, gain access to their credentials, use insider information for trading, set up offshore accounts. You were just the most lucrative target. I thought about the other women, wherever they were, maybe still believing their marriages were intact. Still sleeping next to imposters. Will you contact them? I asked. Already in progress. Thanks to your evidence, we can move quickly. Agent Chen closed her laptop. Mrs. Roderick, I need to inform you that approximately 1 hour ago, French authorities arrested Dean Roderick and Vanessa Halliday at the Hotel de Paris in Monaco. The room seemed to tilt slightly. 1 hour ago. While I was in Pemberton's office, watching his world collapse. Dean had been having breakfast, probably feeling invincible. And then his world ended. Do you want to see the footage? Agent Chen asked gently. You don't have to. But we have security camera video from the hotel. I nodded, not trusting my voice. She turned her laptop toward me. The video quality was crisp, clear. A hotel restaurant, morning sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Dean sat at a corner table in a white linen shirt, looking relaxed, confident. Vanessa across from him, visibly pregnant now, laughing at something he said. Then Dean's phone lit up. He checked it, and I watched his expression change. Confusion first. He tapped the screen several times, his movements becoming more agitated. Another notification. Then another. He was receiving alerts that every account was inaccessible. Every asset frozen. Every carefully constructed escape route blocked. Vanessa said something, concerned. Dean stood abruptly, making a call. His free hand ran through his hair, the gesture he made when he was panicking. I'd seen it 100 times. 4 French police officers entered the restaurant. Plain clothes, but their purpose was unmistakable. Dean saw them coming. For just a moment, he froze. Then he ran. He made it maybe 15 feet before 2 officers caught him, pulling his arms behind his back. Vanessa screamed, standing so fast her chair toppled. Other diners pulled out phones, recording everything. Dean's perfect escape, his brilliant plan, collapsing in a hotel restaurant while tourists filmed it for social media. The audio was muffled, but I could read Dean's lips as the officers cuffed him. How did she know? Agent Chen paused the video. Do you want to see more? No, I said quietly. That's enough. She closed the laptop. Vanessa Halliday is claiming she didn't know about any fraud. Says Dean told her he was legally separated from you, that all the money was his from investments. Is she? Doubtful. We found emails between them discussing the offshore accounts. She knew. Agent Chen stood, gathering her materials. We'll need you to testify when this goes to trial. But between James Lysander's recordings and your financial documentation, this case is airtight. Dean Roderick is looking at 20 to 30 years federal prison. 20 to 30 years. Dean would be 71 when he got out. If he got out. What about James? I asked. Full immunity in exchange for testimony. His recordings are gold. Dean basically narrated his entire conspiracy. James will walk away from this. She paused at the door. For what it's worth, he seems genuinely remorseful. He was a victim too, I said. Just a different kind. In a separate room down the hall, James sat with 2 other agents, the digital recorders from his apartment laid out on the table like evidence in a murder trial. Which, in a way, they were. The murder of my marriage, my trust, my old life. Through the small window in the door, I watched him talk, his hands moving animatedly as he explained the coaching sessions, the rehearsals, the gradual realization that he'd been manipulated into federal crimes. Pemberton was in yet another room, his expensive suit rumpled, his face gray with shock. Agent Chen had told me he was cooperating fully, desperate to avoid prison. He'd already revealed that Dean had 3 other clients with similar estate planning needs, all of them wives in lucrative positions, all of them about to be defrauded. My phone buzzed. Marie, texting from the lobby, news just broke. Investment banker arrested in Monaco for multi-million-dollar fraud. It's everywhere. CNN, Bloomberg, Financial Times. Dean's face is on every business news channel. I looked at the message, thinking about Dean's obsession with reputation. How he'd carefully cultivated his image as successful, sophisticated, trustworthy. All of it destroyed in a single morning. His face now associated with fraud, betrayal, federal crimes. Every Google search of his name would bring up his arrest for the rest of his life. Agent Chen returned with coffee and what looked like a phone book worth of documents. These are the formal charges: wire fraud, money laundering, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, securities fraud, and about 15 other counts. How long until trial? Months, probably. Dean will fight extradition, hire expensive lawyers, drag this out as long as possible. But Mrs. Roderick? She smiled grimly. He's going to lose. The evidence is overwhelming. I thought about Dean in a Monaco jail cell right now, probably calling his lawyer, probably trying to figure out how this happened. He'd forgotten the most important thing about stealing from a forensic accountant: we're very, very good at following money. And even better at finding the people who try to hide it. Agent Chen, I said, when can I go home? You're free to leave anytime. We have everything we need. We'll be in touch about testimony schedules. She handed me her card. Mrs. Roderick, I know this doesn't fix what happened. But you took an impossible situation and turned it into justice. That takes strength most people don't have. I stood, taking the card. I just wanted my life back. You got more than that. You got accountability. There's a difference. In the lobby, Marie waited with Isaac, who'd apparently driven straight from the airport. My brother pulled me into a fierce hug. I saw it, he said. The arrest footage. It's all over the news. Lil, you did it. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected. None of this happens without you calling me from that plane. The three of us walked out of the FBI building into Manhattan afternoon sunlight. Somewhere in Monaco, Dean was being processed into custody. Somewhere in Queens, James was probably packing up his studio apartment, preparing for the testimony that would define the rest of his life. And I was free. Finally, completely free. Where to now? Marie asked. I looked up at the Manhattan skyline, thinking about the apartment I'd never return to. The life I'd never go back to. The woman I'd been before I knew my husband could be in two places at once. Now, I said, I start over. 6 months later, I stood in our old apartment for the last time. The movers had taken the last boxes yesterday, leaving only pale rectangles on the walls where artwork once hung. The space echoed with emptiness, with the ghost of a marriage that had been more performance than partnership. I was waiting for the building manager who would take possession in 20 minutes. The divorce proceedings had moved with unusual speed once federal prosecutors presented their case. Dean's attorney, working from a French detention center while fighting extradition, had little leverage against evidence of fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy. The judge, a woman who'd seen enough financial crimes to recognize predatory behavior, had been particularly unsympathetic to a husband who had hired an actor to replace himself while liquidating marital assets. The settlement left me with more than I'd expected. The apartment sale proceeds, recovered funds from the frozen accounts, and damages that Dean's insurance company paid rather than face a public trial. Money couldn't buy back 3 months of sleeping next to a stranger or 9 years with a man capable of such deception, but it could buy freedom to rebuild. My phone rang showing a client appointment reminder. The irony wasn't lost on me that my trauma had become my specialty. The office space I'd leased in the Flatiron district bore a simple brass nameplate: Chin Forensic Consulting, specialist in marital asset protection and identity verification. What started as word-of-mouth referrals had grown into a waiting list of women who suspected their realities had been edited. Just last week, I'd helped a surgeon from the Upper East Side discover her husband of 15 years had been using deepfake technology to appear at medical conferences while actually running a separate practice in Miami. The week before, a Broadway producer learned her spouse had hired 3 different lookalikes to maintain alibis across multiple cities. Each case felt like excavating layers of deception with the same tools that had saved my own life. The building manager arrived, accepting the keys with professional detachment. As I rode the elevator down for the last time, my phone buzzed with a text from Isaac. Giovanni's at 7. My treat. Giovanni's hadn't changed in 40 years. Still serving the same red sauce recipes our grandmother had declared the only acceptable Italian food outside of Naples. The vinyl booths remained patched with duct tape. The checkered tablecloths bore decades of wine stains, and the owner's son still couldn't pronounce bruschetta correctly despite being third-generation Italian-American. Isaac waited at our usual corner booth, a bottle of Chianti already open. He stood when he saw me, pulling me into a hug that lasted longer than necessary. We'd grown closer through this ordeal. The shared trauma creating a bond that went beyond siblinghood. "You did it," he said, pouring wine into glasses that looked like they'd survived both world wars. "The apartment's really gone. Handed over the keys 20 minutes ago." I took a sip. The cheap wine tasted like childhood Sunday dinners. Feels strange. 9 years erased in an afternoon. Not erased. Transformed. Isaac raised his glass. To the woman who figured out her husband was in 2 places at once and brought down an international fraud ring. To the pilot who made the phone call that saved my life, I countered. We drank, the ritual of it more important than the wine. Isaac had carried guilt about that morning for months. Convinced he'd destroyed my marriage with one phone call. I kept explaining that he'd revealed the destruction, not caused it. But survivor's guilt doesn't respond well to logic. "I have something for you," he said, pulling an envelope from his jacket. "It arrived at my building yesterday, addressed to you care of me." The return address showed Dayton, Ohio. James Webb's handwriting, careful and precise. I opened it slowly, not sure I wanted to hear from the man who'd lived my life for 3 months. "Dear Ava," the letter began. I noticed he used my name, not Lilith. Maybe he'd confused the story I was telling with someone else's. I continued reading. I wanted to reach out now that the legal proceedings are finished. "First, thank you for not pressing additional charges. The FBI had enough without your testimony to give me probation and community service instead of prison time. I'm teaching acting classes at a community college here. Finally using my skills for something honest. I tell my students about those 3 months, about how the best performance of my life was also the worst thing I'd ever done. Some roles I tell them aren't worth playing no matter how much they pay. I think about you sometimes, wondering how someone recovers from what Dean did. Then I read about your new firm, about the women you're helping, and I understand that you've turned poison into medicine. That's a kind of strength I didn't know existed. The storage unit had one item I didn't give the FBI. A photo from your wedding that was in Dean's instruction packet. You looked genuinely happy. I'm sorry I was part of taking that from you. I hope someday you find something real to replace what was stolen. With sincere regret and genuine admiration, James Webb. Inside the envelope was the photograph. Dean and me cutting our wedding cake, both of us laughing at something off camera. I studied my younger self, trying to remember what had been funny enough to cause such genuine joy. The memory wouldn't come. He seems genuinely sorry, Isaac observed, reading over my shoulder. He was a victim, too, in his way. Aiden destroyed multiple lives chasing money that's now frozen in federal custody. I tucked the photo back in the envelope. James just had the misfortune of being desperate enough to take the role. We ordered our usual. Pasta arrabbiata for me, linguine vongole for Isaac, with enough garlic bread to concern a cardiologist. The familiar flavors tasted like home, like continuity in a life that had been completely reimagined. What's next? Isaac asked, spinning pasta with practiced ease. Rebecca Harrison tomorrow. CEO of a tech startup. She thinks her husband might be using AI to fake business trips. Then Thursday, the Whitman case. I meant for you, not work. I considered the question, letting it sit between us like another dinner guest. 6 months ago, I'd thought my future was mapped out in comfortable predictability. Now at 37, I was single, successful in a field I'd invented, and completely uncertain about everything except my next client appointment. I don't know, I admitted, surprising myself with the honesty. And that's oddly liberating. Good, Isaac said. Because I was worried you'd say something about finding another relationship immediately. You need time. I need therapy, I corrected with a slight smile. Which I'm getting. Turns out discovering your husband hired an actor to replace him while he fled the country with his pregnant mistress is the kind of thing that requires professional help. Isaac laughed, then sobered. Have you heard anything about the trial? Dean's still fighting extradition. His lawyers are claiming the arrest was unlawful, that the evidence was obtained illegally, that his rights were violated. I took another bite of pasta. But Agent Shen says it's all just delay tactics. He'll be extradited eventually, and then he'll face 20 to 30 years federal prison. And Vanessa? Cooperating now. Turned on Dean completely. Says he manipulated her, lied about being separated, promised her a legitimate future. She's probably lying, but the prosecutors are using her testimony anyway. The baby? Due in 2 months. The state of New York is pursuing child support claims against Dean's frozen assets. Vanessa's moved back to somewhere in Pennsylvania with her family. We finished dinner in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from shared history and mutual understanding. When the check came, Isaac grabbed it before I could. My treat. Remember? Next time is mine. Deal. Outside, the November air had turned crisp. Manhattan was preparing for winter, the streets decorated with early holiday lights that seemed premature but hopeful. You're going to be okay, Isaac said, pulling me into another hug. You know that, right? I know, I said, and for the first time, I actually believed it. I walked back to my new apartment, a one-bedroom in Brooklyn Heights with views of the Manhattan skyline and none of the ghosts of my old life. It was smaller, quieter, mine in a way the Tribeca loft had never been. Inside, I made tea and sat by the window, looking out at the city lights. My phone buzzed with an email from a potential new client. Another woman who suspected something was wrong, who couldn't quite explain why her husband seemed different lately, who'd found small inconsistencies that everyone told her she was imagining. I'd learned that intuition was often the first alarm bell. That women were told to doubt themselves, to accept explanations that didn't quite add up, to prioritize harmony over truth. I'd learned that some lies were so elaborate, so carefully constructed, that they could fool everyone except the person living inside them. And I'd learned that forensic accountants made excellent detectives, because at the end of the day, every deception left a paper trail. I responded to the email, offering a consultation time. Another case. Another woman who deserved to know the truth about her life. My phone dinged with a news alert. Dean Roderick's extradition hearing had been scheduled. The article included a recent photo, him in French custody, looking exhausted and defeated. A far cry from the confident man who'd thought he could outsmart everyone. I closed the article without reading further. Dean's story was over for me. His consequences were his own to face. Mine was just beginning. I thought about James's letter, about his hope that I'd find something real to replace what was stolen. The truth was, I'd found something better than a replacement. I'd found myself. Not the woman who'd trusted blindly, who'd ignored red flags, who'd built a life on a foundation of lies. But the woman who'd figured it out. Who'd fought back. Who'd turned the worst thing that ever happened to her into a way to help others. That woman, I was discovering, was someone I actually liked. Someone I wanted to be. I raised my tea mug to the window, to the city beyond, to the future that was uncertain and terrifying and completely mine. Here's to new beginnings, I said to the empty apartment. And for the first time in 9 years, I was completely, entirely alone. It felt like freedom. 3 months later, 9 months since Isaac's call that changed everything, I sat across from a new client in my office. She was a neurosurgeon from Mount Sinai, impeccably dressed, hands steady despite the tremor in her voice. I know this sounds crazy, she said. But my husband seems different. Nothing I can point to specifically. Just small things. The way he holds his coffee cup. A joke he doesn't laugh at anymore. Forgetting our daughter's middle name last week. It doesn't sound crazy, I said gently. Tell me everything. She did. And with every detail, I saw the pattern I'd learned to recognize. The subtle shifts. The small inconsistencies. The intuition everyone told her to ignore. By the end of our consultation, I had enough to start investigating. Another forensic trail to follow. Another woman's reality to verify or shatter. How long will it take? She asked. Depends on what we find. Could be days. Could be weeks. I met her eyes directly. But I promise you this, by the time I'm done, you'll know the truth. Whatever that truth is. She left with the kind of fragile hope I remembered from my own early days with Marie. The desperate need to be wrong mixed with the terrible certainty that she wasn't. After she left, I stood at my office window, looking out at the Flatiron district below. My practice had grown faster than I'd anticipated. Word of mouth in certain Manhattan circles traveled quickly. The woman who'd discovered her husband's replacement, who'd brought down an international fraud ring, who helped other women verify their realities. My phone buzzed. Marie, sending a case file on a potential client in Boston. Then Isaac, dinner this weekend? Mom wants to see you. Then Barbara, coffee tomorrow? I have baby photos to assault you with. Life continuing. Relationships maintained. A future being built one day at a time. I thought about Dean sometimes. Not often, and never with the pain that used to accompany his memory. Agent Shin kept me updated on the case. His extradition had been approved. His trial was scheduled for next spring. Vanessa had given birth to a daughter and was testifying against him in exchange for immunity. James had sent one more letter, brief this time. He'd gotten a small role in a regional theater production. Nothing big, but honest work. He ended with, "Thank you for showing me that some things are more important than survival. Like integrity." The wedding photo he'd returned sat in my desk drawer. I'd looked at it once, trying to access those memories, that joy, that version of myself who'd believed in forever. But that woman was gone. Not destroyed, transformed. Evolved into someone stronger. My office door opened. Marie, arriving with 2 coffees and that familiar determined expression. "Got a live one," she said, setting the coffee on my desk. Hedge fund manager's wife. Thinks her husband is hiding assets before filing for divorce. Could be big. How big? 9 figures big. I smiled. When do we start? How about now? We spread the initial documentation across my desk, bank statements, property records, the paper trail that always existed if you knew where to look. My forensic accountant brain clicked into gear, finding patterns, spotting inconsistencies, following the money that men always thought they could hide. This was my life now. Not the one I'd planned. Not the comfortable predictability of a marriage I'd thought would last forever. But something better. Something real. Something mine. Hours later, after Marie left and the office had grown quiet, I stood at the window again. Manhattan glittered below, millions of lives intersecting, separating, continuing. Somewhere in that city, a woman was discovering her reality wasn't what she thought. Somewhere, a man was planning deception. Somewhere, justice was waiting to be found. And I was ready. Not the woman who'd made turkey sandwiches while her world split in two. Not the wife who'd tested her husband with eggs and false memories. Not the victim who'd discovered an imposter in her bed. But the forensic accountant who'd traced millions through offshore accounts. The strategist who'd built a digital trap. The survivor who transformed trauma into purpose. I thought about Isaac's question from months ago, "What's next for you?" The truth was, I still didn't know. And I'd made peace with that. Maybe I'd date again someday. Maybe I'd find someone who was actually who they claimed to be. Maybe I'd build another relationship on a foundation of truth instead of lies. Or maybe I'd stay single, independent, focused on helping other women escape the traps I'd barely survived. Both futures seemed equally possible. Equally acceptable. The only certainty was this: I would never again ignore my intuition. Never again dismiss small inconsistencies. Never again choose comfort over truth. Dean had taught me that, in his way. The most expensive lesson of my life, paid for with a marriage, a home, and the naive belief that love alone could protect you from deception. But I'd learned it. And now I was teaching it to others. My phone buzzed one last time. A message from an unknown number. Mrs. Roderick, my name is Jennifer Matthews. Your name was given to me by a friend. I think my husband has been replaced by someone else. I know how crazy that sounds. But I'm watching him sleep right now, and I swear it's not him. Can you help me? I looked at the message for a long moment. Then I typed back. Yes. I can help you. And it doesn't sound crazy at all. Call me tomorrow morning. We'll figure this out together. I hit send and set down my phone. Somewhere in Manhattan, Jennifer Matthews would read that message and feel the same fragile hope I'd felt when Marie first promised to help. The same determination I'd discovered when James failed his final test. The same strength that had carried me through federal interrogation rooms and Monaco arrest footage and the dissolution of everything I'd thought was permanent. Tomorrow, I'd start another investigation. Another forensic trail through shell companies and offshore accounts. Another woman's life verified or shattered. Another truth uncovered. But tonight, I was just Lilith Chin. 37 years old. Single. Successful. Uncertain about everything except this. I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Doing exactly what I was meant to do. And Dean Roderick, wherever he was in French custody, preparing for a trial that would end with decades in federal prison, had no idea that his greatest crime wasn't stealing my money. It was underestimating me. That was the mistake that destroyed him. And the lesson that saved me. I turned off my office lights and headed home to Brooklyn, to my small apartment with its view of the Manhattan skyline, to the life I was building one case at a time. The future was uncertain. But for the first time in 9 years, it was mine. And that was enough. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.